Hey everyone, welcome to Riffs Across Generation. I'm your host, Andrew. I'm here with my co host,
Eli.
Eli.
Yeah,
And we
baby.
have the man, the myth, the legend, if you will, Tony Demolition Man Dolan from the beginning of metal, right? Is
From
that
the
safe to
beginning
say,
of
Tony?
time.
Yeah.
That's what he feels like at the
Yeah,
minute.
yeah.
Hey, what's up? Nice to see you all. Nice to see you guys.
There's going to be so much we want to touch on in this interview with Tony. There's so much metal history that he carries, that was involved with, and that he knows of. Some of it may seem a little hurried because we don't want to keep Tony or keep this interview going for 4 or 5 hours. So, we're going to start with the early days, and I hope this isn't too big of a task for us and for Tony to cover some of this. So, Tony, let's just start off with life before, Adam Kraft and life before 1979. How did you get into music?
Wow. Well, I was born in the UK in the north of England in '64, and my mother and father were into rock and roll. So, I was kind of raised listening to obviously Elvis, but Bill Haley and the Comets and Frankie Valli and, Eddie Cochran, all that kind of rock and roll stuff. Chuck Berry. So, that was kind of my first hearing of music, and they were into dancing and they loved all that stuff. And then, so not so much the Beatles and all that guy. They were more. It was more that kind of rock and roll thing I remember. And I fell in love with Bill Haley and the Comets, of course, and all of that kind of American classic rock and roll stuff. And then in the early '70s, of course, the glam rock thing started in England with Slade and Queen were around, and Dave Bowie and Gary Glitter and all that, the Sweet and all that kind of stuff was happening. And that was kind of an exciting time. I was just getting into my early youth, and like Eli, just a young guy, in his, I mean, you're 13, I guess, but I was like kind of, 10, 11 coming through. So it seemed quite exciting, very of the moment. And then we emigrated to Windsor, Ontario. And when we got there, it was very, very different to what I'd come from. And every radio station, or a W Riff radio in out of Detroit, because Windsor was right across the river from Detroit. It was the Motor City, it was the rock and roll capital, Detroit Rock City. And so every radio station was playing rock music, which I had not really heard. I mean, REO Speedwagon and Aerosmith and Foreigner and Ted Nugent. And I was like, what is this? And so that kind of, to me, it was like a fantasy coming from the north of England, very working class, very industrial area, grey, wet, cold. And now I'm in Canada, sunshine every day, fishing every day, shorts every day, and a
Nice.
t-shirt. I was like, I'm in a movie. And then this music, so it was quite exciting. And then one of my friends that I went to school with, who I'd met over the summer before I began my school in Windsor, his brother had tickets to see a show in Detroit. So I turned up at his house one day and he said, "Oh, we're going to Detroit tonight to see a show." And I was like, "What?" So I had to go and ask my mom. And she said, "Well, who's going with his older brother?" Okay, well, yeah, okay. So they said, "Yeah, just come over. We'll go over in the car and see this show." And I'd never heard of the band. I'd never kind of been to a rock show in such a way. And we ended up going to the Cobo Hall and saw Kiss. And
Nice.
it was like being at a circus. I'd
Yeah.
never experienced anything like that in my life. And I thought, so they said, "What do you think of the concert?" I was like, "I guess it was amazing." And when my mom and my stepfather asked me how was it, I said, "Yeah, I think we kind of went to a circus because there was fire and blood." And then they were like, "What the fuck were you doing?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just connecting that to music was, wow, that's incredible. And so I really threw myself down the stairs with the whole thing then. And just fell in love with that whole Americana and that whole rock and roll thing that had gone to the next level in the '70s in the US. And then, of course, we came back to the UK in 1978, and I went to a school disco, was one of the first experiences I had. And everybody was going around with like bin bags on them, like trash bags on them, and all this like crazy music, like the Sex Pistols and all of that. And I was just staring, thinking, everybody's gone mad. What the fuck's going on? And I remember saying to someone, "What is this?" And they were like, "It's punk." I was like, "What is punk?" And they were like, "The music." I was going, "But that's not music." My head was going, "That's definitely not Foreigner. That's not
Right.
Toto or
Right.
Styx." And so trying to relate to that was so difficult. My hair was down here. I had a big mustache. I was wearing plaid. I had flares on. I had a Kiss Army patch, and
Nice.
everybody at school was going, "What is that?" I went, Kiss Army." And they were like, "What is Kiss?" I was going, "A band?" And they were like, "A band? What called Kiss?" And I was like, you don't know Kiss? And I was like, where have I gone to? I've gone to Mars. And so, but fast forwarding through some months, whatever it was, maybe it was the right age I was, 14, 15, maybe it was my age. And I started to want to, rebel. Eli won't tell you this, but he's going to rebel someday and he's going to go, fuck it, I'm out of here. This sucks, because that's what we all do. We want to have
Right,
our
right,
voice and we want to express ourselves. Sometimes it's through art, sometimes it's through, our music. And I think that kind of clicked. All of a sudden it clicked with me because seeing Ted Nugent, seeing Foreigner, seeing Journey, I couldn't do that. I can't play a stadium. I can't do what Kiss do. That's what these alien people do. But
right,
when I went to see punk bands in a club, they didn't sound so good. They weren't the best players. They were shouting rather than singing. And I thought, well, I can do all of that. I could do all of that.
right,
So
right.
I guess that kind of clicked with me. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. I can express myself. And that was it. I was born right there, right then. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard a couple interviews with you, and you also mentioned Lemmy and Motorhead a lot in your
Yeah.
being influenced growing up. So I heard one story that you were going to see a punk band, and I think Motorhead was playing with
Yeah.
them, and you didn't want to
Yeah.
see a hippie band at that time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's bizarre now when I think about it. I got given from Todd, who's Lemmy's manager, this when I was in the Rainbow once after Lemmy
Nice,
died. And inside, they said, Tony, we were playing the Roxy, I think, and he came to see the show. And then afterwards, I went to the Rainbow, and they said Todd wants to have a word. So I went to see him, and I went, hey, Todd, how are you? And he was like, I want to give you something. It was a great show. I know Lemmy meant something to you. He handed me this box, which I guess they were selling, and inside was one pick, was Lemmy's pick. And he said this was the last box I was carrying with the last pick for him in case he needed it, and
nice.
he gave it to me, and so the man's still with me, and I could never use it. It's too small for me, and I'm too brutal. But the fact that I've got it is amazing. But yeah, I was going to see every punk band I could, everybody. I saw Stiff Little Fingers, the Angelic Upstarts were my favorite. American punk bands, the Rich Kids, the Radio Stars, the Dickies, Clash, anything. I just couldn't get enough of going to these shows and the energy that was coming out. And I went to see a local band who were opening for a band I'd never heard of at Newcastle University, 78 or whatever. Didn't have any money, so they got me in for nothing. And then after they played, I went straight into their dressing room to underage drink their beer and let loose. And they went, Dolan, you should go and see this band that we're opening with. And I was like, yeah, I've never heard of them. Are they any good? And they went, well, yeah, they're kind of like, they got long hair and leather jackets. I was like, oh, they're hippies. I don't want to see hippies. And they were like, yeah, but they're not kind of hip. They're more kind of punky. Anyway, they had talked me into it because they said they're mad. You love them. You love them because they're mad. So I squeezed into the club all dark, got down to the front and stood there thinking, I don't even know what to expect. And then I heard this sound. The lights went out. I heard this sound, which sounded like someone was driving a combine harvester, backing it into the venue. I was like, what is that noise? And bang, when the lights went on, it was Lemmy's bass. He was playing Motorhead. And that was Phil, Eddie, him. I mean, just my mind just blew. The whole of my head came off. I was like, I walked out like someone had hit me with a fresh salmon that weighed 50 pounds across the face. I was
Nice.
so shell shocked. And I just thought, wow, what amazing thing. And it struck me the next day when I wanted to get one of those bass guitars he had. I didn't know what it was called. I didn't know how to play it, but it looked so cool. I wanted one. And I thought, I wonder if you took the Dickies, who were one of my favorite punk bands, who played at 210 beats a minute. They were like Carlos Caballeros, like brrr,
Yeah,
water
yeah, yeah.
slide. It's like that. The speed blew my mind. What if you took the Dickies and smashed Motorhead into them? That kind of speed with that kind of noise, what would happen then? And that's kind of where my whole heart was like, I want to do that. I want to put those two things together, stick them with glue, and just see what happens. And
Nice,
so that was where my journey began.
nice.
So you recorded 4 albums with Adam Kraft. How is it recording that style of music before people, I guess, really ever heard it?
Well, it was weird, because we all came out of this area in Wallsend, which is a town at the end of Hadrian's Wall. Emperor Hadrian, when he took over for the Roman Empire, it was the furthest point that the Romans ever got. And they built a wall. And I was born at a town called Wallsend, which is at the end, one end of the
Oh
wall.
wow.
And in that place, there was one recording studio, Impulse Studios, And that's where Neat Record was born from. And so all the local bands you saw all the time, because if you wanted to record demos or do anything, that's the only place you could go to. So from there came, Raven, Tigers of Pang Tang, Venom, Atomcraft, all of these bands, Warfare, Blitzkrieg, everybody was coming out of their studio. And so there was a whole fraternity of us who got to know each other. So the scene was quite vibrant, but some of the players were much more advanced. They were good guitarists and good drummers and good singers, and they had obviously slightly older. And we were a bit less good at the stuff that we did, but we still wanted to make a noise.
Yeah.
So I guess they saw us as the noisy little brothers who they didn't quite understand what we were trying to achieve. And on my part, we went towards the more atomic roots, anti-nuclear stuff, and it was, the world's going to blow up and crack the earth. And Venom went towards the more satanic side. So those two things, again, set us apart, because everybody was singing about girls and drinking beer and
Sure.
getting fucked up. And we were all going, the world's going to blow up and we're all going to die. So they were like, will you stop it? We're trying to be happy. So I guess that was like unusual. And certainly then, Eli, when people listen to our early records now and say, well, that's not really that fast or that's not extreme, you have to remember that the fastest song anybody'd ever heard was Overkill by Motorhead. And the most extreme thing they'd ever heard was something like No Class, So when you think of that now, it blows your mind, because there's so much inglorious extreme music with blast beats, and it's so intense and so complex. But then it was very simplified. And it was shocking. It was shocking because it wasn't what you heard or saw on TV. It wasn't what you heard on the radio. So people were kind of nervous and excited at the same time. They wanted to talk to you. They wanted to come and listen, but they were scared to do it just because it seemed so like they didn't know what was going to happen. It was like driving a truck with no brakes. It's great to drive it, but when you got to stop, then you start to panic because you're going downhill. That was kind of the feeling, was like, holy shit, what do we do if we have to stop? And so I guess it was a kind of weird time, and people didn't get it. They just didn't understand,
Do you feel, not skipping ahead too far, but do you feel modern metal, modern like heavier stuff has lost that gritty feel? Just that, balls out, we're going to make a lot of noise, we're going to be angry.
Well, I think
instead of we're going to concentrate on that double bass and we're going to focus on that.
Maybe to a degree. I think there's a balance, because they talk about the underground, and there is no underground. There's just music. What they imply by underground is a corporate way of saying it's not commercial. Because Slayer did wonderful music. Rain and Blood was in the peak of their, but it had to be on Def Jam. It had to go out, with a massive label, with a massive distribution. Is it any better? Maybe it's better produced, but is it any better than what their early works were? Not really. It's as good as. But the early works would be classed as underground, whereas by the time they hit Rain and Blood, now they're commercial. And the same thing for Metallica, with the first album, Kill 'Em All, even Ride the Lightning to a degree. But by the time you get to the Black Album, I mean, they're Elektra, so they've got the money, the power, the influence, and so that becomes a corporate thing. But the corporates, when they don't understand the music scene, I think, or don't understand a new band trying to push a frontier, they say it's underground, because they can't capitalize on it, because they don't know how. They don't know, how is this working? What are the kids actually doing? And so, but that's the only reason it's called underground. But it's still fertile in that position because you have more freedom to be creative. So I think you get the black metal explosion from the underground. I mean, if you think of Pantera, thank God Pantera came in and used to kind of put everything back where it was, because we'd lost it with the grunge and the Brit pop. And so the fan base, the young fan base, was listening to indie all the time. So they weren't hearing metal bands. Metal bands weren't getting airplay. They weren't getting to do shows because there was a whole new thing happening. And Pantera kind of stood up, and then it started to move back towards that again. Thank God they did, because now we had an explosion, and now we have the riches before us. And the same thing with Scandinavia, with the black metal movement, that kind of exploded there again, and everybody in Europe then stood up and said, yeah, we can play metal again. And they were already playing it, but the audience wasn't there, the magazines weren't covering them, the corporates were ignoring it. But I think the energy and the spirit that I see when we go out and play, from young people, from young bands in particular, like we're doing the US tour, we start in January, run through to February, and part of the deal was we just take one band with us, and then the undercard has to be the best local bands from the scene. You can choose who they are, but just put the best ones on. I want to platform them. I want to
Yeah.
see them and hear them. Everywhere we've got bands, and they're writing to me going, "Oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. We're going to do such great." And I'm so excited because I'm in all these shows, I'm 30 shows. I'm going to see, 90, 100 bands that I don't know about that I get to see, and they're all dying to prove themselves. And that's, when people say, well, the metal scene's not so good and it's dead in America, it's like, really? Because there's 100 bands that are going to be playing with us. And they come from Mount Dora in Florida, friggin' Detroit, Ohio, Cleveland, friggin' upstate California. I mean, they're every show.
Yeah.
There's a load of bands. So, and they're all local. So tell me that there's no scene when all these bands and these amazing musicians with this incredible music is still happening. Of course it is. It just doesn't get covered properly. So we need to make that platform work. So yeah, and as soon as the corporates can think they can make money from it, then you get all the support and all the help. As soon as they think, well, they can't make a buck from it, it's like they don't care if you exist or not. But what I always used to say was, we don't need to rely on anybody these days. We are the industry. You guys are doing this blog, and there's a million others just as inspired as
Yeah.
you, inspiring people by doing this. And then we go out and play with any bands anywhere. It doesn't have to be Vakken. I don't need a stage that I have a whole church built inside and pyros for the whole show. I could play your backyard if there's enough people who want to see it. And I don't care that it's that, because it's not about the things, it's about how you mean the music and the people that are listening to it and what it means to them. So I think it's very rich, it's very vibrant, and it's very exciting at this moment in time. We just don't all know it yet because we don't hear it all the time.
Yeah, perfect, perfect. I want to touch a little bit on digital and the impact it had on music in a little bit, but I wanted to take this back to your transition from Adam Kraft to Venom. How did that happen? Did you see a better opportunity, or did Adam Kraft just run its course?
Yeah, I mean, we did, by the time it came to '83, and I'd done a load of demos and lots of shows, the guitarist was about to leave because he fell in love. That's what happens, and he had to make a choice between us and them. And normally that wouldn't be a big problem, but there was just three of us, so it was kind of a
Yeah.
big hole. And then my sister offered me an opportunity to go back to Canada to help her out for a season, for a year. So I just thought, okay, maybe I'll just put it to rest for now and go. When I came back, we began again. I went to Neat Studios to exchange a guitar for a bass if anybody was selling a bass. And it was me and Kronos. And he said, yeah, I've got a bass can give you. So I swapped my guitar for his bass. And it was his Flying V. He used it the first, his Flying V that he used at the first Hammersmith show. It's pretty shit, and it wasn't the best bass, but I didn't care. It was a
Yeah.
bass.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we exchanged that, and he said, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've just come back from Canada, and I'm looking, to get some new musicians to put the band back together. Bit Blues Brothers there." And he said, "Well, I know this drummer," so he gave me this drummer he knew who happened to be their manager's brother. So I said, yeah, met him. He was great. We got on really well. He was a good drummer. And we started to do demos for an album. And most of the songs were older songs from back in the day. And within a year, we had a record deal. We did the album and off we went. In reference to that album, I think that, we were kind of behind the cart with that because the explosion had already happened.
Mhm.
We'd never got a record out when we should have. So by the time I did get a record out, we were kind of looked at as being late to the race. But actually, half the songs on the album were done before the race began. So, I was like, well, it is what it is. But yeah, we went out in 1988. We did a tour behind the Iron Curtain. It was still, the wall was still up. It was
Nice.
still Russian. And with Exuma and Nasty Savage from Florida, with
Yeah.
Ronnie and the boys, which was amazing.
We
And
had him on the last podcast too, and we're going to see him with you
brilliant,
guys.
yeah,
So
good,
yeah,
good friend. And they're playing with us when we play Mount Dora this season. So
Montori. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah, we did this tour, but Abaddon was the tour manager because him and the old Venom manager were managing the band. And we got to the very last show, and he said, "Hey, Tone, can I have a word?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you think we should play a Venom song tonight?" I said, "Oh, you want to play?" And he was like, "Well, because everybody had thought that's Abaddon, that's Abaddon." So I said, "Yeah, okay." So I went to see the Polish band that was with us, Wolf Spider. And I said, you guys know Welcome to Hell? And they were like, yeah, kind of. So I said, I'll get a guitar and run through with you. So I ran through it and I said, listen, I'll play the guitar and sing. Abaddon's going to get on. Why don't you guys come on and we'll all play Welcome to Hell for the audience to say thank you for the whole tour and being so cool, which is what we did. And it was recorded. So we finished the tour. We come back to the UK. My singer, who I was using at the time, or who we had at the time, I wasn't using him. We had him at the time. Decided he didn't want to do it anymore. Again, because of a girl, he wanted to move cities. I was like, okay. The guitarist, just for whatever reason, I don't think he liked me, but wasn't aware he didn't like me. But maybe he felt he was being overshadowed by me. But he said he wasn't interested in doing it anymore. And the drummer said to me, well, we can find new people. And I said, you know what? I've been doing this for over a decade. I'm freaking tired. And I think I'm just going to give it a rest. Everything I wanted to achieve, I've achieved. I made the album. I wanted to make one album. I did it. I wanted to tour the world. I've done it. I said, I don't think I'm interested anymore. And then after about 2 weeks, I got a phone call from the Venom management, Abaddon and Eric Cook. And they said, do you want to come to a pub and have a couple of drinks and have a chat? So I assumed automatically it was, what are you going to do with Atomcraft? What's the next step? What should we do? And an hour later, they'd asked me to replace Conrad Kronos because he'd left the band after Calm Before the Storm and relocated to Boston. He wants to do a Van Halen, Dave Lee Roth kind of thing with the two guitarists. And I was like, okay. So I said, well, I would do it if Jeff was there, because without Mantis, I mean, I don't know how this is going to work. So they said, we've asked him and he told us to fuck off. So I said, okay, well, then it's not going to work.
Right.
And they went, yes, but you could talk to him. If you talk to him, you could convince him to come. And I thought, well, yeah, okay. So I did. And basically, me and Jeff said, if you do it, I'll do it. And I said, well, I'm not only going to do it if you do it. So we agreed we'd do it. And that was I was in Venom. But I never actually, they were huge to me, but also my friends. And I went back to point zero, all our girlfriends, we lived in the same place. Jeff's young first girlfriend lived across the road from my mum. Her brother would come over, we'd jam. He was the one who brought the first single when they finished it.
Nice.
And Conrad's girlfriend was my girlfriend's best friend, and she would show us photos or photocopies then of their first photo session down on the beach, which ended up on the back of Welcome to Hell. And so, we were all in the same vein there. So I didn't see at that point that I was replacing Conrad. I just thought, well, I'm going to play with the band, write some new material. They're my friends, and we can do those great songs. We can keep playing those great songs.
Right.
And if Conrad doesn't want to be there, then that's okay. He can do what he wants. So I didn't actually see it. It wasn't like I was going into AC/DC or Deep Purple or something. I was just with my friends who I'd known all that time and saw all that time. And I was there when they did black metal. To me, it wasn't the same kind of emotion, I guess. So when people say, how did it feel stepping in? It was like, it didn't feel like anything. It just felt like I was with my guys and we were playing the songs. That was it,
Nice. That
Yeah.
sounds like it's the best it could be, right?
Just your friends with some great tunes and you're just letting rip. It was brilliant.
So your first album was, Primeval in 89?
89.
Yeah. What were some of the songs you wrote off that album? Like,
Well, once I'd done with Jeff and he was going to come in, I began writing straight away as soon as I decided to do it. So I had Primeval and Mantis then came in, and when he came in, he had a riff that was kind of like Deep Purple's Perfect Strangers. They'd done on a demo before he left. He'd recorded something. I'd heard that. And he came in, and when I played Primeval, it was much faster because it was based on, it's actually Sammy Hagar's This Planet's on Fire, if you listen to the riff. And I had it really fast, and Abaddon was going, slow down, slow down, slow down. And then he slowed it right down to that, and I was going, fucking hell, I'm going to fall asleep. You must be joking. We can't play it like this. And he was like, yeah, but it sounds good. I was like, it's just too slow. But when Jeff turned up, he then played the Deep Purple riff on it. I was like, oh my God. And it became that. So I finished the lyrics off for it. And then I already had Parasite, Blackened Other Priests, Carnivorous, Skeletal Dance. So yeah, I think by the time Jeff came in, the only thing I wrote after Jeff had decided to do it was Insane, he then wrote Into the Fire, Harder Than Ever, and of course School Days, because he's a pervert. So yeah. And then we did this cover of Black Sabbath's Megalomania. I was at Abaddon's house And we were writing because he had a couple of poems, kind of poems, lyrics that he wrote for like Parasite and Skeletal Dance. He had some stuff, but they didn't scan so well. So I was like, just editing them and adding to them and stuff so they would work on the music. And then he said, I'm going to make a cup of tea. I was like, yeah, I'll have a cup of tea. And then he put, very English that, isn't it? Drawing a cup of tea. Not like beer or a line of
Right,
Coke.
right.
It was like, would you like a cup of tea? That's how we rock. And yes, and then he said, oh, I'm going to stick this on. He put on, it was Megalomania of Sabotage by Black Sabbath.
Hmm.
And he wasn't a Black Sabbath fan. So, but I was. And he came back in. He went, "What do you think of that?" I went, "Well, yeah, I've got the album. It's a great album. I love it." He's like, "Yeah, but that song." I was like, "What, Megalomania?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, it's great. What about the bit from just the cowbell? That bit at the end?" "Yeah, well, it's all part of the song. I don't know what you mean." He said, "Yeah, well, what if we did that?" And I was like, "What? The song's too long." "Yeah, but not the first bit, just the last bit." And I
Hmm.
was like, "Just doing the last bit." He said, "Yeah, we could do that." So I said, "Put it on again." So I had a listen. I went, "Yeah, it's kind of funky. Yeah, we could do that. What for the album?" And he said, "Yeah, why not?" And I said, "Okay." Yeah. So he said, "Would you learn it?" I said, "Yeah, yeah, it's pretty straightforward." So anyway, I wrote all the lyrics down and put the track. So this is how it runs. And then we went to rehearsal. And when we went to rehearsal, Abaddon said to me, "Whatever you do, don't tell Mantis it's a Black Sabbath song." And I said, well, he's bound to guess it. Oh, hang
Right.
on. Yeah, he's not a Black Sabbath fan. He might not. So he said, yeah, but if he thinks it's a cover, he won't play it. So tell him you wrote it. So, of course, Jeff comes in. I start playing the riff. Tony just joins in as if we're jamming it. So Jeff starts jamming, looking at the chord structure. And then when we finish, he goes, I fucking love that. Did you write that? And I said, yeah. So we just rehearsed it. Then we recorded it. And then we were sitting in a studio in Newcastle when they sent the masters, the finished thing through, the finished album through, with the cover, with all the notation on the cover. And while they
No.
were playing it, Jeff was reading. I was sitting next to him, and then he went, hang on, who the fuck is Osborne Butler Ward? I said, it was Black Sabbath. And he went, yeah, but why is their name on the album? I said, well, because Megalomania, they wrote it. And he was like, you said you wrote it. And I went, what? It was a joke. So, yeah, it's kind of mad.
Nice.
But nice
Nice.
to look back at that. He was shocked rather than angry, but it turned out really well. And we just played a festival in Newcastle 2 weeks ago, 2 Saturdays ago. Not the last Saturday, but the one before. And I played Primeval and Megalomania back to back for the first time ever.
Wow.
And it was
Nice.
such a cool feeling, yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So you did, moving forward, you did 3 albums with Venom, correct?
Yes, well, we actually did four.
You did
But
4.
One of them is the
It's a
the
combo.
hidden one.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
was yeah, we did Kissing the Beast. We were going to Russia. We were playing to the Winter Festival in Russia outside St. Petersburg's palace. And it's the festival of light where it's midwinter and it's sun doesn't go down anyway, so it's light all the time. So maybe it's midsummer or whatever, but I don't quite remember. I'm too old. But anyway, we played. There was UFO Asia Girls School, the suite. It was like a big event, and we went over to we went over to do that. We thought because they didn't have any releases there, no Venom releases at all. We actually wrote something for a company there they could release. And we did a load of Venom classics on Kissing the Beast, Black Metal, which, of course, Bloodlust and that. And we had 2 tracks left over from the sessions that we recorded, which was Fragile Life and Flatline. So we stuck them on as bonuses. So that became like the official 4th album. But it
Nice.
disappeared apparently. So I don't know if the Russian mafia had something to do with it. It never went out and it disappeared. And then I found it kind of 10 years later in a store in Belgium. I was like,
Wow.
oh my God. So yeah. But officially 3 albums, an EP, and the Live 90 video. Yes.
Nice. And then you weren't done with music, so Empire of Evil was formed, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like when Mantis left Venom 86, he did his solo album, Winds of Change,
Hmm.
and they were shooting a video, and he called me up and said, would you come down and help me out in the video, just play bass? So I kind of went down, we shot the video for Deceiver, and I kind of was in the middle of Atomcraft at the minute, so I borrowed my girlfriend's spandex trousers and her leg warmers and a pair of gloves, and she was like, "What are you doing?" I said,
Yeah,
"I
right.
need to borrow your stuff." So I had sunglasses on and a headband, so I tried not to look like me because it was all kind of AOR stuff, but really good. So I did that. When after the Venom thing, Of course, Conrad came back from America. They redid themselves for 5 minutes before they exploded again. And then Mantis was doing his solo thing again. I was working in London for Queen and the Royal Shakespeare Company as a technician, learning how to do automation and engineering. And then Jeff called me. He was doing Mantis Zero Tolerance and said, listen, do you fancy coming and playing bass on my album? So I said, okay, send me the tracks. So he sent me them. I had about 3 or 4 days, learned them, drove up after work, went straight into the studio overnight, recorded them all, got back in the car, went back down to work. And then we did a couple of shows where I played bass for him, Earthshaker in Germany and the Underworld in London. And then there was some, and then he then got management and was doing stuff that I couldn't commit to because of work. So he then moved away and carried on with a drill. He changed it to drill, and that was it. I stopped doing music again. Kind of started doing acting by accident. And then he called me up again. He did his show in Newcastle, and he had his drummer had a problem. The drummer he was using, Bodo Stricker, was playing a festival in Germany. They were due to play the show in Newcastle, and the drummer had come off the ramp after the show or before the show and snapped his ankle.
Yeah.
So he had to call Jeff and said, I can't do the festival because I broke my ankle. And Jeff was like, shit, shit, shit. And then Anton, who did Resurrection album and is Conrad's brother, who's a great guitarist but also a very capable drummer, called Jeff and said, I'll play for you. I'll come and play. So he was like, oh, really? So he went down to sessions and they did the show. At the end of the show, it was being videoed for YouTube. At the end of the show, they played black metal together and Jeff sang it. And then the comments started coming through. My God, it's you and you. You should get the Demolition Man. That would be cool. And so I get a phone call from Jeff and going, this is the idea. Do you want to come in? And so I said, yeah, why not? Okay. So I'd never played with Anton. I thought this will be cool. We'll have some fun. And we had to come up with a name, and they wanted to use the name Primeval. But I remember there was a band in the 70s out of California, but there was another band that I kind of liked out in New York called Primeval.
Yeah.
So I was a bit cautious about that. They said, but we have to because it relates to the album. It's important to your period, Venom. And I said, like, well, you know, but I don't, if this band, and so they went away and came back and said, we've had a look, they don't do, they've disbanded, they're not doing anything. So I was like, okay. So then the first thing that was put up was we formed a band called Primeval. But then the guys in Primeval obviously read that and then attacked me for, what the fuck are you
Sure,
doing? You know,
sure.
and I was like, no. I didn't. So I changed it immediately. I used an anagrammical, confused way of doing the letters and came up with Empire of Evil. So the Empire of Evil only came out of Primeval. Everybody said it was shit, but it doesn't matter. It was Primeval, just Empire of
Right.
Evil. I thought the guys would be really appeased by that. They were still pissed at me, but that's how life goes. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's how Empire of Evil was born. And then the first thing we were doing, we did a early recording, Creatures of the Black, where we decided we didn't have a lot of songs. So we said, well, why don't we pick our favorite band and our favorite song from that band and put that out as an EP? We'll record it. So I think Jeff picked God of Thunder, Anton picked Hell Ain't a Bad Place to Be. Of course, I picked Motorhead, and then we decided on Exciter by Judas Priest because we all loved that song. That's kind of what we did, and then we wrote a couple of songs to go with it as well. And that led to doing Hell to the Holy, which was the first album. In the interim, after we recorded those two things, there was a tour going out to USA, and Anton had had a bad experience with his brother and Venom in the USA, so he was a bit nervous about us doing it. But I could see potentially it was good for us to go as an introductory tour for the album. So there became a bit of a conflict between Jeff and Anton. I tried to just stay as clean as I could because I thought, I don't want to get into this again. Holy shit, we just started. Let's not argue again. It's like the Venom curse. And so it got to a point where I had to just go, okay, I'm not fighting about anything anymore. You either do it or you don't do it. I don't care which. And he said, well, I think we shouldn't do it. I said, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And that was it. We just went straight to find another drummer. Because I thought, I don't want to get into this politics when we've only just started. You know, we're supposed to have fun. It's all about just moving forward. And so it was unfortunate, but I'm still of the same mind now. It's like, I don't want to argue about it. I don't want to fight about it. If you're happy and we're all going down the same route, let's do it. And if you're not, then you have to be happy. So go wherever you need to go and just be happy. Just do what you want to do and be happy. There's no point trying to make anybody do something they don't feel good about doing, because you don't get the best out of them. And the whole thing with music in particular is the communication you have with people. And the more you're enjoying it, the more they'll enjoy it. The more you're expressing yourself, the more they can, express back to you and take from it. But if you're not happy doing it, then the audience are not going to be happy listening to it. And I didn't want that, because I don't care about things and bits and pieces. I don't need the biggest house or a swimming pool and cars and, the best clothes. I wear the same clothes I was wearing 30 years ago. I'm not a fashionista.
Yeah.
But that's not important to me. I feel comfortable in that. But the one thing that I do this for, and the one thing that I want, is people communicating, to be able to play music to people and communicate about music, not just what I'm doing, what we're listening to, what's out there. It's exciting, and it's inspirational, and it helps you through the bad shit, and it gives you empowerment for the rest of your day. When you get home from school, Ellie, when you get home and you kick the dog and kick the cat and kick the door and tell your mum and dad, like, leave me out alone. The first thing you do is go in your room, put your headphones on, or not, in your case, you pick a guitar up and crank it to 11 and just, you just want to play, because all of a sudden it gives you energy and it feeds you soul and you feel better about it. And now I can handle the crap that's been happening. And that's what we use it for. So, for me, that is everything. So when it becomes political, it's not good. So that was how we started as Empire of Evil. And of course, we got Mark Jackson in and we enjoyed 2 albums with that. We did the Hell to the Holy, and then we followed up with Crucified. And the Crucified album was interesting because those songs that had not done, because Temples of Ice and the Wastelands hadn't done as well as Primeval, the money hadn't been put in, the covers weren't so good, the production wasn't as good, and we didn't tour them. So they didn't really get the opportunity for people to hear them as well as they heard the first one. But I knew that material was, some of those songs I'd written was really good. So I pulled all out my favorite songs from that and re-recorded them with Mantis doing the production, with Mark Jackson playing the drums, and they came out exactly how I'd written them. Sometimes you write something and or you paint something or draw something and you've got a vision of how it's going to be. And then other people come in and it's not what you imagined, but you can't kind of describe it to them, but it's not right. And this was one of those opportunities where how I'd actually imagined them sounding at the end and being played, they were. And so that album for me, Crucified by the Empire of Evil, is one of my favorite moments that we did, because it's like, wow, I got to hear those songs properly done. Not that they weren't properly played, but how I'd envisaged them to be done.
Right, the overall feel was what you wanted it to be like. Yeah, totally understand. And we're almost to modern times now. We took a run through your life there for a little bit.
Sorry.
No worries at all. That was all good stuff.
Trying to get it all in for you, so there you go.
And so we came full circle, and Venom Inc. kind of came about, from what I understand, at the Keep It True festival in Germany.
Yes, yeah. There was a thing in Newcastle called the Brofest, and the guy there said, "Listen, we do this thing. It's retro. I get new wave of British heavy metal bands that were around at the time to play this show. Would you come and play as Atomcraft? But I'm going to ask you, would you play the whole of Future Warriors, which was the first album?" Which we'd never done in its completion. So I thought, well, putting the old band back together, that's never going to happen, because it's all part of that Venom thing. Everybody's got their ball and is standing in a corner going, I'm not talking to him. So I was like, I'm not going to waste time trying to do that. But I have players, so sure, I can come and do it. So I got Crane Meyer from Artillery, and Paul Caffrey, who was a guitarist, and Paul Caffrey, the drummer for Gamma Bomb, thrash band out of Ireland. And I knew they were big fans and they would help me out. They said, yeah, let's do it. So we went into rehearsal and we did Future Warriors live. And Mantis, of course, was living in the Northeast, so he was around at rehearsals. And he said, I love Pour the Metal In. So I said, well, play it, come and play it. So he played it. And then Heat and Pain's really cool. I said, well, play that too. So at the end of the show, he came on stage, I introduced him, and he joined us, and we all played. So it was fun. It was fun, but nothing more than we just did it for that one time. It was fun. But then a guy wrote to me called Oliver Weishammer, who has the Keep It True festivals in Germany, southern Germany. And he said, Tony, I was at the show. It was really cool. I liked it, And I saw you got Mantis on stage to play. But did you know Abaddon was in the audience? And I thought to myself, what would have happened if Abaddon had got up and the three of you had played? And I said, oh yeah, no, that would have been cool, but that's never going to happen because they hate each other, so they won't. They'll no way it's going to
Yeah.
happen. And he said, well, I'm going to make you an offer. If you come to Germany to play Keep It True as Empire of Evil, and Abaddon happens to be there, what's the chances that he could come on stage and you could play 4 or 5 Venom classics? So I said, well, yeah, but it's never going to happen. It just won't happen. And he said, but you could make it happen. And I said, I don't know if I could mend that fence for them. But he was insistent and please do it for the fans. There's 2,500 fans or 2,000 fans. They come every year. They'd absolutely love it. So in the end, I capitulated and went, okay. So I spoke to Abaddon, who just went yes straight away, because what else was he doing? Nothing. And then I spoke to Mantis slowly, who just went, no fucking way, no fucking way. And I was going, yeah, but. And eventually he went, okay, but we can't call him Empire of Evil. And then afterwards, we just go our separate ways. And I said, okay. So I had to then come up with a name. And my agent at the time said, well, it has to be Venom related. So I told Mantis it's got to be Venom related. So he said Die Hard, which is Legion's Iron and Steel, which is a line from Die Hard, the single. And I was like, okay, but it doesn't work as a band name, but that's okay. And then my agent went, why don't you call it Incorporated or something like that? And I went, I suppose you could be Venom Incorporated because it incorporates all of our music, including Venom. So that was it. I went, right, Venom Incorporated, Iron and Steel. Then I sent off to get some T-shirts made for the event. And when they came back, they just said Venom Inc. And I said, but it says Venom Inc. It's supposed to be Venom Incorporated. And they went, do you know how long Incorporated is? It doesn't fit on the
Yeah.
T-shirt. They said, this looks much better. And I was like, shit, oh, okay. So it was Venom Inc. Iron and Steel. And within 10 minutes, nobody was using the Iron and Steel. Everybody was just calling it Venom Inc. And that was it. We were born from that. You know, we played 4 or 5 songs. Classic song, Seven Gates of Hell, Thousand Days in Sodom, you know, some favourites, and everybody was like going crazy. Here, 2,500 people after all those years, or 2,000 people singing Countess Bathory at you was like, wow! It was blew our mind.
Yeah.
And the next morning when I got up to go for breakfast before we left Germany, my emails, my phone, everything was going nuts. And we were getting offers to play, you know, Japan, China, Australia, New Zealand, America, South America. And I was like, what? And I was like, how did these people know what's just happened? And of course, the internet, you know, in the old days, we
Yeah.
didn't have it. So everybody had been filming and putting it up online. And then everybody else went, oh my God, they're back together. And that was it. The whole thing exploded. So basically, I said to the two guys, listen, we could do this for a year. Just play live shows, no albums, none of that bullshit that gets you fighting with each other and any of that. We just play the live shows and then we just go home. And I thought maybe 15 months, maybe 18 months, and all of a sudden we're making a fucking album. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
it's real again.
Yeah.
But you know, it was a great time. It was a great time, I gotta say.
And it was a great first album of A Satanis. It opens with, I would think, maybe your best bass work. That
Thank
sound
you.
of the opening of the album just is classic and is one of the best bass parts I've heard.
Bless you.
So
And
that,
I used Ave Maria at the beginning
yeah.
because John Sazula, who was Megaforce Records, who actually was the one who discovered Metallica, Anthrax, he was the one who managed Anthrax and got them onto their giant label and Overkill. So he was responsible for all that in New Jersey, and he was the first one who took Venom to America, New York, in the 80s. And John was in retirement in Florida, and I pulled him out of retirement and said, I need you to be my guru because, like, you are my guru. And he was like, yeah, but I'm retired. I went, well, don't retire, unretire. I said, you don't have to come with me, just give me advice. And so he came out, and one of his peace songs where he would relax and if he was just smoking his joints and sitting with his feet in his pool in Florida was Ave Maria. So Carreras is Ave Maria. So that's why I picked that to open the album. It was like my salute to John Z, who'd
Nice.
made me do the fucking album. So, which I didn't want to do, but that was great. Me and Jeff had such a great time making the album. It was great fun. We laughed a lot, and I think we did some good work on there.
For the question we've all been wondering, do you consider Ave Satanis a Christmas song?
Absolutely. Absolutely, definitely a Christmas song. You know, I think, yeah, it evokes all. Look, I've even got my dancing Jesus. Look, It's all about the Christmas. It's all about the kids. No, definitely. You know, because I posted. Did you see that, Elaine? Because I posted it the other day, and I went, "A very Merry Christmas," and it was
Yeah, yeah,
opposite
yeah. I
California.
saw it, and I was talking to Eli a
Yeah.
little bit about it. Yeah,
I just thought, you got to have some of the spirit. But yeah, absolutely. That
yeah.
was brilliant. I love
Awesome.
that.
Very, very fitting. Yeah. So the album's great. And I think there's one song on there that kind of takes your history and blends into what you're doing even now. And that's Black and Roll. It's the best,
Yeah.
I think, the best term and the best song that kind of sums everything up. Do you think that's the
Yeah.
best description for what you've done over your life in music?
Yeah, I think so. I think we did a song on Hell to the Holy called Snake Pit, which was actually about me and Jeff in our favorite nightclub in the 80s. And that was so much fun. And we just laughed ourselves stupid recording it because we just evoked so many memories of it. We go, oh my God, do you remember when blah, 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 that we recorded. So we had so much fun. And when it came to this, he just turned up one day and said, oh, I sent you a piece of music. And I put it on the Pro Tools. And he went, think Motorhead. And when I put it on, I heard this track and he went, if you put bass at the beginning. So I was like, oh shit, it sounds like a Motorhead song. He went, yeah.
Yeah.
I got into this riff and I thought he's going to love this. So he said, why don't we stick it on the end? I said, yeah, okay. I said, I've got a lyric idea. And then we ended up with Black and Roll. And so every line is a salute to, a Zeppelin or
Right,
Sabbath
right.
or Metallica or something. So we really had a blast writing it. It was like, oh, how should we? Because it needs to be a story, but if we just use the musical threads to tell it, so much fun to do,
Yeah.
so much fun to do, yeah.
Yeah.
And the
It's a
result,
super
every
fun.
time I hear it, it makes me warm inside, going, yeah, it's a bit of our history there.
Yeah. Super fun song to listen to. Yeah. I'm glad you guys recorded that one.
Yeah. Can you talk about any of the album art on Ave? What's the idea behind it?
Well, yeah, the whole idea was, the guy who actually painted that was, from a cerebral idea. He's an artist who works in Serbia and he specializes in doing incredible art for free. Well, not for free. He doesn't get paid for it. The payment that you give, he supports from the wars in Serbia. There's a lot of children who were orphaned. And so he supports the orphanages, and this is how he raises money for them. Incredible work he does. And so I came across his work and what he does, and that was close to my heart. And so I said, listen, I need an album cover. And he said, okay, what do you want on it? And most artists will, you'll give them a sketch or an idea, but I like them to evoke whatever the lyric tells them. So I said, I'm going to send you the lyrics that I've got. And then I want you to what they mean, whatever the lyrics paint for you, whatever the picture is you see when you're listening to the lyrics or when you're reading the lyrics. And he came up with that, the Lucifer. And so if you study the cover, I did all the rest. I did all the layout. He just did the painting, and then I did the layout for everything else, all the photos and everything else. But the painting itself. If you look, the Temple of David is there to the right. As you look at the picture, on the right-hand side is the Temple of David. On the left-hand side is the burning bush and the tree of the apple. And you can see Adam and Eve embracing the scorched earth from the desert, 40 days and 40 nights. He has his panpipe, so he's leading us. And obviously the snakes in his sack, which is symbolic. And the sheep, the two sheep. He's leading sheep. God, devil, leading sheep.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the sheep has a torn thing, so you can tell if you look closely, it's not a sheep, it's something wearing a sheep. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so there's so much
Nice.
symbolism in there. And the darkened sky behind and the barren earth. And people go, oh, so this is like, is it coming? I said, I don't know. Is he leading? Is he coming to lead you away to something better? Or is he bringing doom towards us? Only you can dictate that. Only you can interpret that. And it's what you see. Some people see some elements and some people say no elements and some people say all the elements. So it depends on how you're viewing it, how you're listening to it, and what the meaning is behind that. Is it positive or negative? I know what I think, but maybe the artist thinks different to me. But what do you think? And that's what I kind of try and do. Our label in our head of A&R used to say, don't try and be too cerebral with your audience, Tony, because they won't get it. And I'm
Right,
like,
right.
Well, I challenge that. I think they will get it if they know that they have to, it's their choice. You know, it's if you go, well, here's Jesus on a cross and he's pissing himself blood and it's all a mess and we've wrote you twat underneath. Of course, you know, everybody knows what you're trying to do. If it's satanic and he's sitting there, you know, and there's bulls everywhere and naked women, then it's obvious, you know. But I want to give you something that's maybe something symbol, maybe something you've got to think about. If you look at Hell Awaits or, you know, that cover in particular, or God Illusion or something like that, if you look at things like that, what is it about? What is there? You know, you have to really look at it as a piece of art, and you might get from it something completely different to me. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the music. You know, the artists who take our photos, you know, that one shot that you go, fuck, that's a great shot. But it took someone to actually take probably 100 shots to get the one that they thought that's the shot. And the same thing with the album covers. You know, with AI, we do incredible things these days and you can make amazing art. But to have an artist who's just dealing with a lyric or an idea and then paints
Yeah.
something, it comes from their mind and from them, then I've got to figure out which bits are me. Where am I in that? And everybody does the same thing. And I think that's part of that musical, wonderful, artistic world that we're trapped in. And your dad will tell you, Ellie, and I'm sure a million other people, like old people like me, will tell you the same thing. We would spend hours in a music store just looking at album covers, and we'd buy an album based on the cover look
Yeah.
cool. We had no idea who they were. We didn't know what it sounded like, but we'd buy it on there. It
Yeah.
wasn't. We couldn't click across to Spotify just to sample things or listen to some demos that they'd put up on their pages. We had to actually just take it, and if it was good, thank God for that. But we bought it on the strength of the cover, and so that is really still important. And I think, you know, while streaming and Spotify and iTunes, all of that stuff is amazing. And I love it because I find things I would never know were there. So I do embrace it and I do love it. But I also miss the bit where I can see the artwork, where I can pick something up and just go, what is that? And then take it home and be excited about experiencing whatever's inside that. So when we do album covers, or when I am involved in the album covers, I want to do that. I want to stimulate you to go, what the fuck is that supposed to be? Brilliant. If you ask that question, then that's amazing. I don't know. What do you think it is? And then you're already talking about it and you're already involved in it. And if
Yeah.
you then listen to the music, maybe you'll find out what it is. Maybe the secret you're looking for is in there. And you'll go, that I know what that is. I know what that is to you. Then that's fantastic.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate, you know, your attention to details on that and the artwork, and there's a few bands, and I think from my view, unfortunately, it's only the bands that have come through everything and realize that the artwork and the marriage of artwork and music kind of go hand in hand
Yes.
with the people who, like you said, haven't discovered music on Spotify. It's more the album
Yeah.
covers and pairing it up. We talked to Nasty Ronnie a little bit about that with his new album, and the art's really important to him too. So yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that, and it's a great album cover on that one.
Oh yeah, 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 and that's exactly, yeah. The old schoolers, like someone like Ronnie, you know, that is, you know, Slayers, and you know, it is has a vibrancy that has to be interpreted in some way, you know.
Yeah.
And there's an impact in that. You know, if you think of the cover of Master of Puppets, I mean, that's pretty heavy duty. You know,
Yeah.
the cover of that, you know, I mean, obviously it's familiar to us now and we don't consider the concept. But if you actually look at the cover and think about one and think about the concept of Master of Puppets and that album cover, you know, I know one was on Justice for All, but when you listen to one and you see that video, boom, you're actually, wow,
Yeah.
there's something heavy there. And the same thing with the cover of Master of Puppets, you know, you think, wow. And I like a cover that you can just keep looking at. You know, you just stare and listen to the whole album and just stare
Yeah.
at it. I mean, I
Absolutely.
remember the first Motorhead album, there was nothing on the cover. It was just Motorhead and then the Walrus Pig. And then on the back, the track list. And I stared at the whole album while I listened to it. There's nothing on there. What am I looking at? But it was just something tactile about, you know, I'm with the band. I'm close to the band because I can actually feel
Yeah.
it's something tangible. And I miss that with the streaming services. We don't have that tangible thing. I want to have that, you know. So that's the only downside of like scooting across my playlists on iTunes or whatever. I can't take, you know, because you might find a CD covered in jello under the carpet. You might find the CD cover with a different album in. You would find a CD cover with no album in and don't know where the album is. And it's like it's just slipped beside all the CDs. But an album, every album was in the right place. I didn't
Yeah.
see anybody go, oh, this is not the right album. And you took it out slowly and you took it out and you looked at it and you blew it and you wiped it and you were really careful with it. That seems like a ball ache, when I could just pick up my phone and listen to anything with my headphones on. But it was part of the interaction. It was part of the music. You had to take your time. You listened to every song on that side
Hmm.
and then turned it over and listened to every song on that side. You might skip one you didn't like, but it was very rare that you would do that. You would
Yeah.
just play the whole thing and experience it from the first crackle to the end.
Do you think digital platforms have cheapened music and the experience overall?
Well, I don't think they've cheapened music. I don't think. Obviously, the intention is to make more money, so yeah, they've done that successfully. I don't think there's so much cheapened it. In fact, I think it's availed bands an opportunity to platform themselves that you would never hear about otherwise, and I like that. You could go online now, and I could go to anywhere in Manila. I could go to Tokyo, Osaka, Russia. I could go anywhere on the planet and find a band that I'd never heard and listen to them and see pictures of them and probably video from shows. So I like that. You can still discover these things instead of in the old days, we'd get a magazine and look for pen pals and look
Yeah.
for bands or the local music store and then write to people. Take
Right.
forever. And then
Tape trading. Yeah.
yeah, tape trading. Tom Warrior, Cawthorne, Schmier, we all tape traded. You were going across the planet. It would take weeks to get to wherever it was
Yeah.
going to get before you heard anything. But we still did it because you were still discovering. Whereas now it takes seconds, just seconds. So I love that bit. But so I don't think in that way they've cheapened it. I think they've created a good platform for access. But they've taken away the tangibility of records, and when they closed it, it was an industry manipulation completely. I don't remember, and I don't know from anybody I know, but I know from my own experience, I don't remember any record company at all or any outlet, Sam's, HMV, Virgin Records, whatever it was. Nobody came to me or anybody I know and said, do you want to still keep buying vinyl or you're not interested anymore? But that was what they told everybody. Well, vinyl's not selling, nobody wants it. Well, if you haven't asked anybody, how do you know if we don't want it?
Mm.
And everybody I know just complained that you couldn't get it. And now Eden, I think, for 2 years in a row came out, their biggest selling media of outlet for music was vinyl. All of a sudden in Europe, so everybody wants vinyl again. So now you buy a stereo record player, costs you like 5 times more than it ever costed you in the old days. And you buy a record, it costs you like 6 times more than
Yeah.
it used to cost. So it's like, oh, so, well, that's not going to promote the music. Well, we only do limited editions because people don't want it. Well, hang on. I don't know what your job is, Ellie, but I'm sure you don't make enough money to keep buying records every fucking week at $50. And plus the shipping, it's like, come on.
We're
So
very selective. Yeah.
exactly, you have to be selective. But if the price was good, and it was affordable, you'd probably buy records until the cows came home.
All the
You'd come home
time.
every
Yeah.
Saturday. Your mum and dad would be like, "What are you doing? You bought like 50 records. You've already got your whole basement will be a record studio." But that's what we had. That's why we had such big collections. So that's the dismay about the whole industry. They've manipulated the whole thing to gain as much money as possible, and now they go back and go, "Oh, you do want records? Okay, we'll just charge you more to listen to them." And it's like, and then we limit the run on them. And I thought, what it would take a huge star, maybe a Taylor Swift or a Metallica to turn around and go, the next record is only being done on analog tape, so it can't be digitally stuck online, and it's only going out on vinyl, and that's it. And then the whole world would buy record players and vinyl, prices would come back down because they'd all go, well, everybody wants them. So the more people that want them, the cheaper it can be. The less people that want them, if everybody smoked, a packet of smokes would be $2. If nobody smokes, or the very few people smoke, a packet of smokes
Yeah.
is $25. It's just logic, isn't it? So I would like that to happen, just so that the younger generation, the next generation, can enjoy what we enjoyed about the whole thing: the smell, the touch, and the experience of it.
Wanna go, Dad?
Do you have
You
any
mean-
plans for more music?
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. We've got a busy season. We start on, I think, I fly out to Indiana on the 4th of January, and we begin in Santa Ana on the 8th, I think, for the tour, which will take us through about 8 weeks in the States. It's only part one. Then we come back to home. I think we got some South American shows. Then we come back to the UK. And then we run into Europe. So we got a full tour in Europe. And then towards the end of the summer, we'll be back to America to do the states we've missed because we couldn't get to Portland on this or Seattle. Or there's lots of places. Pittsburgh we couldn't get to. So we're going to put them in to do part two and then into Canada. And then the end of the year, we're off to Asia. In between all of that, I've got 2 live records I'm going to put out, 2 live Assault series records from shows that we've done in the last season that were just great shows. So I want to do them to give them to the fans over there. So there's one for Chile, and I want to give it to them because they were amazing, and this is your album, you're on it, And then so 2 Assault is then we got an EP we've been working on. I've got a couple of songs for a new EP, and we'll probably slap a couple of live tracks on to introduce the live stuff. And then the new album, which will be towards the end of the year. So that tentatively titled at the moment, Beyond the Black, like the tour. But I recently found out that there's a very good band called Beyond the Black, so maybe I'll have to just change that title.
All
But
the good
it's
names are taken.
yes, bastards. Why did they do that? I've been through all of that. I went Kiss, I thought, now Rush, I did all that, yeah. But Sammy Hagar, I even went with because I thought that's just a made up name, but apparently he's a guitarist.
Right.
But yeah, but yeah, that it's the question on There's Only Black was exactly that. There's only black. So the experience of death, all the lights go out, what is there? If the lights go out now, we can't see each other. We don't have any power. We don't have nothing. So how do you work in a world like that? A blind person would know. But around a blind person, you still have all the electricity and all the power sources that feeds into their world. But if there's none of that, there's no expression because there's nothing. And that's the end of the universe. That's what's in a black hole. That's what happens when we die because it will only be your experience. The 3 of us now will all die, but we won't experience the same thing. But we won't know that because we can't come back and go, hey, what was yours like? Because this is what happened to me. So we'll never know. And it's the same thing. We'll never get to the end of the universe. Nobody will ever go in a black hole because you don't come back out. So even if you do go in and go, "Oh, hang on, it's all bananas and daiquiris and beaches, you won't be able to come and tell us. So that's a huge, what is this all about question. So that was the whole idea of There's Only Black. The follow-up beyond the black is, but there's only black because that's all we see. You have to commit. So on your journey through life, don't say, I can't do that when you haven't challenged yourself if you can or not. When you jump out of a plane at 5,000 feet, it's a scary thing because you can see the ground and you think, shit, what have I hit the ground? When you go the higher you go, the less scared you become because you can't, your brain goes, well, I'm not going to hit anything now because it's too far away. So you can't, you jump out your bedroom window, you're going to hit the ground. But if you jump out of your bedroom window, but your bedroom window is 15,000 feet in the air, you can't see the ground. So your brain goes, you're not going to hit anything. You're just going to fly. And so it becomes easier the more you challenge yourself and be aware that you can do it. And so, but you'll only know if you can do it if you do it. So you can't guess you'll do it, and you may not want to do it again. You might hit the ground after a jump and go, fuck that, I shit myself, I'm never doing that again. But you may also jump to the ground and go, that blew my mind, that was the most amazing thing I've ever done, I want to do it right now again. But you'll never know unless you do it. So that's the analogy for life, and that's the whole point of Beyond the Black. Commit to whatever it is. If it's death, if it's the journey, if it's your work, if it's your art, if it's your expression, if it's your job, just commit to it if you really believe in it and see what you're able to do. So challenge yourself, and only you will know what you can do. And then that's who you are. And then you stay with that, and then you're content. And the only people in life that I've met who are discontent with what they do are people who didn't do what they wanted to do. So do what you want to do, and if you fail at it, at least you did it. If you don't become great at it, or you decide you don't like it, that's fine. You just stop and go, I didn't like it. I thought I would, but I didn't. Brilliant, but at least you did it. Instead of being an old man sitting on a porch in a rocking chair going, I wish I had of. Don't wish you had of. Just do it. Just do it.
Right.
Yeah. You
Yeah,
are your power. That's it.
Yeah, that leads right into like the next question I had. It seems like you've lived 3 lifetimes of making music and creation and all of that. And I think you answered the why and but the how do you do it? What daily things do you do to keep you motivated and going and involved with this?
This
Yeah.
people, people like yourself, people like Elle, people, that I talk to. I spend a lot of time on my social media communicating with people, talking about, their bands. I watch, and it's more than just a promotional thing for me. It's like it's living through that. It's being that. I have my guitars and I do my music, and and I do my normal life too, and it's just being inspired by people, and that could be someone you see in a movie, that could be someone you see in an interview, that could be something you listen to, a piece of artwork you see, one of your friends has achieved something, you think, man, that's amazing. You did that. That's amazing. Whatever you derive your inspiration from, and it does involve other people. So look to those people that inspire you and be inspired. And then, because what you will know is that you're being inspired by people, but what you won't know is that you are inspiring people. And you'll never realize that until they actually tell you. And most of your friends, when you're a certain age, won't tell you that because they think, well, I'm not going to let him because he'll be a cock then, or they'll think
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
brilliant. So they don't tell you, but it is happening, and you won't find out until much later. But when you get to an older state and you're being creative or you're doing something amazing, the person, I always said, when say they run the 100 meters in the Olympics, right? You've got eight runners, right? Well, someone's going to come first and someone's going to come last. So you go, well, that person lost. The person who came last lost. 8 people ran that race. 8 people out of the billions of people on the planet were the fastest people on the planet.
Yeah.
So the person who came eighth is faster than anybody else who entered the race,
Yeah.
and all the people who didn't even get into the race who tried, and all the people who've been training for years. So it's like, are they really a loser? Not really. They made the Olympic final. And they're all winners, But then anybody who made the Olympics are winners because there's millions of us who can't even get to the Olympics. And there's
Right,
lots of
right,
people who
right.
try. So, measure success for yourself. I wanted to make an album. That's all. If I make one album when I was 14, 15, if I can make one record, I'll be happy for the rest of my life. And I've made many. But that first one was the important one. If I could do one movie, I'd be really happy. Just one movie. And I made a few, but the first one was the one that I was like, oh my God, I can't believe
Yeah.
I'm doing this. So, set your challenges for you. And other people might measure your success slightly differently, but that's them. Because that's what they would say is their success if they did it. But you only measure your own success. So set your goals so that you can attain them. When you've hit that, then you go to the next one. And you don't try and jump. Don't try and cut a corner or jump the queue. Just take your time. Take your time. Be you, know who you are and where you're going, and you stick to that. You stick to that. And that's it. So I'm always
Nice.
inspired by just talking to people, finding out where they are, what they do, how do they do it, what do they think. And that just inspires me to keep thinking and to keep doing something. And when you have a message from someone who goes, thank you so much for whatever. Well, if they start a message with thank you so much, that's got to be inspirational straight away, isn't it? They're thanking you. What for? Just for doing something that means something to them. And I think that's our ethos. That's my Luciferian ethos. Be good to everybody. Unless they transgression, then, you're at liberty to do what you want. But just be good. It's so much easier to be nice than it is to be an asshole. It takes much less energy to smile than it does to frown and try and be all mean. So
Yeah.
there's a time and place for everything. But if you open yourself out to people, you'll find the most amazing things that you didn't know. And so just always do that.
Great
Yeah,
advice.
yeah. So going off to a little bit of the new tour coming up. You have a U.S. tour coming up, obviously. What are some of the songs you guys would play? Like, how the hell do you even get a set list together for that?
Well, there's a question, isn't it? There's a question. That is the impossible
Yeah.
task. I mean, I'm not going to give anything away because, again, the beauty of technology is that we connected. The bad thing about technology is that me and your dad went to a gig. The only people that know what songs they played were the people at the gig, or maybe some friends in a bar the next day or at work because they go, "Oh, what
Yeah.
did they play?" And we'd have to try and remember everything. And if it's a lot of songs, you'd go, "Oh, yeah, they did play that." No, they didn't play that. Did they play that? I can't remember. But these days, we got 30 shows. I don't want the people on the 30th show to know what we're going to play, but people will take photos of the set list and then send it online. So,
Yeah.
everybody knows what's coming. So what I try to do is I try to rehearse enough songs that I can do something different every night. So you don't know what's going to happen. So you may go, oh, well, they're going to play this, 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 and this, and
Nice.
then we don't. We're playing something else, and you're like, shit, shit, shit. And then, and then the next night they go, oh, no, because they're playing those songs, but last night they played these, and then I played something different again, and they're going, what's going on? So by the time it gets to any show, nobody knows which songs are going to be in. They hope this one, they hope that one, and some people won't get the song they wanted, and some people will get the song they didn't expect. But that's what I want to keep, that kind of excitement, because no crowd is the same every night. No venue is the same every night. No city is the same every night. Of course, we all live in the same planet. You're all Americans and we're all British. But, there's different things in our cities that we're proud of, and where we live is better than where they live. And so all that stuff goes down. Our teams are better than their teams. And so, I want to give you something really special that they got totally different. So each night is a special night. But trying to put a set list together that everybody likes is fucking impossible. I
Yeah.
usually roll out lists, but it's like hours long. So I think we'll probably have about an hour 45, just under 2 hours, because the venues are going, you're going to play how long? I was like, man, I got to put all the songs in. So I don't want you to be bored and go, Dad, can we go home? I'm knackered. It's like just going on. But I want to get as much in as possible. So what I've done is I've looked at, the popular songs. Obviously, we'll have some classics popping up because we want to, and why not? But I tried to do songs that maybe you didn't expect were going to be heard. Maybe you haven't heard before. Maybe people thought they'd never play that live. And so I kind of mixed it up. I think I've got a bag of maybe 40 to 50 songs, which we've got. And I keep shaking it up like the Scrabble thing and just pulling out and go, right, that's in, that's in, that's in. So I think you're going to get a bit of everything. And
Yes.
I just hope that it just sets a smile on your face for the whole show.
So I think you just gave us some motivation to see you in Mount Dora and then the next night in Tampa.
Yeah, baby. Yeah, you got to. Yeah, yeah. And now I've got to do what I've just said, because if you'll go bullshit, he didn't do any of that shit. So now I've got to if you do 2 nights.
Nice, nice.
Brilliant. You see, inspired to be inspired. You just
Inspired.
inspired me to go,
Yeah,
now I
yeah.
have to do it. Brilliant.
Another off-topic thing. In 2017, you announced an exclusive deal with Dutch guitar builder. I hope this is how it's pronounced. Boel Guitars.
Yes,
You play the Boel big generator bass. Do you have any other
I did. Yeah.
favorite instruments or gear, for that matter, you like to use?
I got to. Oh no, he's in a case. I was pointing to him. He's not even there. He's in a case. Yeah, but yeah, they was very good. I turned up at a show. A very good friend of mine, Ramon, who is editor of Lords of Metal, a big magazine out of online magazine out of the Netherlands, came to a show, and he had a friend with him, Elko Slunt, who's this incredible Luther, and he worked for this company, Boel, and they came to meet me at the show, and they said, want you to have a look at this guitar. And so he opened this case, beautiful purple bass. I was like, wow, that looks amazing. And I picked it up. It felt great to play. And he said, yes, talk me through the setup of the pickups and everything. I said, amazing. And I put it back in the box. And he said to me, you can use it tonight. And I said, no, shit, no, I won't. And he said, no, but I brought it so you could use it. I said, no, I can't use that. And he was like, why? You don't like it? I said, no, I love it, but like, that feels really expensive. And he's going, yeah, so? I said, well, man, they don't call me the Demolition Man for nothing. I don't think I should use your bass. And he was like, no, I want you to. I said, okay, well, if it's fucked at the end, that's just how it goes. And he was like, I don't care. So I was like, oh, okay. So I took the bass on, I popped the booked pickups, so they had a pop knob so I could have it single coil or a humbucked. So I popped the knob so it was booked so I could get as loud as possible. I had an Ampex 700 watt RBI amp. I turned the bass up, I hit one E note, and the amp blew up. So I was like, shit. So I took the bass off. I put it back in the box. I kicked it to the side. I said to my tech, give me my bass back. So he gave me my HK custom. We put the spare amp on, and I played the whole show. At the end of the show, I came off, and this guy was there. He went, shit, you hated it. I was like, what? He said, the bass, you don't want it? I said, yeah, can I have it? And he was like, yeah, if you want it, it's yours. I brought it for you. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. He's like, but you only played one note. I said, mate, it just blew up my Ampeg 700 RVI amp. I said, I'm absolutely in love with that thing. I've never played anything. It's blown my amp through playing one note. And so that's how I was attached to them. And they sent me two other ones. I had to get them unlacquered because that one was lacquered, so it was kind of heavy. And at the time, I had before I had my new hip, because I had a new hip done, my hip was failing. It had collapsed on itself, so I didn't really have a left hip, and I was still touring. And my doctor was going, "You can't do this." So the bass, it had to be lighter for me, otherwise I couldn't keep my balance all the time on stage. So they made me two other versions of the big generator, which had no lacquer on, so they were just the wood, so were much lighter, and yeah, they were amazing. And then only recently, I don't know if you've seen recent shots, I got these two Rickenbacker type machines because I bought an Aria Pro 2, which was the Cliff Burton, but an old one, original one from 1978. And Matsu, who used to make them, I wanted all the original fittings because I found this guy in Brighton in England who was selling off gear, and he had an original 78 Aria. Said, shit, I used to have one. So I bought it for him, and I replaced everything with the original fittings, but I couldn't get the pickup. Wherever I went, they just don't make them, difficult to find. I couldn't find a second-hand one. I was looking everywhere, even on tour in America. I'd go into all these second-hand stores thinking, I might find one. Couldn't find one. And then I wrote to Matsu, whose father was Aria, and his son or grandson, and he said, I'll find you one. I spoke to my dad, and my dad says he knows where there's one. So he was flying to Los Angeles. I don't know how, but they found one and sent it to me, and I had my Luther put it in. So that was my beauty. When this guy in Poland said, I'd like to make you a bass guitar, he was showing me all these kind of wacky heavy metal shapes like Destroyers and Explorers, and I was going, I hate the shape. And he was like, really? But it's like metal. And I said, yeah, but I'm not a BC Rich kind of wacky warlock type of guy. I'm just traditional. I want the bass to be a monster. It needs to be a tank. But I said, I want it to look a bit more traditional for me. So he said, okay, leave it with me. And he said, tell me the spec for it. So I modeled it all on the Aria Pro, which is an amazing instrument. So I modeled it on that, said I want a brass nut and I want this pickup to do this, and I need the fret bars to be this wide and this to be the length. And so I give him all the weight and everything. And then I forgot about it. And a year later, there was a knock on my door. I opened, there's an instrument coming. I was like, what's this? And so I brought it in, unwrapped it, and it was this thing that looked like a Rickenbacker, but it was so light, so beautiful, played so fast, and it sounded like my Aria when I turned it on. I was like, oh my God, this guy, he actually made this. So I contacted him and said, thank you so much. And he was like, yeah, I kind of saw you like Rickenbacker, and I know you like Lemmy, so I kind of modeled it on that for you and called it a Dolan backer. And I was
Oh,
like, oh
nice,
my God,
nice.
it's amazing. And just recently, he made
Dolenbacher.
me another one in red and sent it to me, which I used in Mexico, which is just as beautiful. So I have my Boels, I have three Boels, and I also have my Dolenbackers from this Luther Water Guitars out in Poland, which are amazing, amazing. So yeah, I'm very fortunate, very fortunate.
Nice. Okay. Before we let you go, I want to make sure we touch on your acting career. Yeah. You were in Master and Commander, which is a great movie. One of my favorite movies. Can you tell me a little bit how you got into acting and what was it like in particular with that movie, filming that movie? Because it was such an epic movie.
When I worked in theatre when I was younger, you'd walk on and take a letter on, or you'd go on and take a carpet off or something like that. So usually the crew would be asked to fill in for an actor just to do a practical thing, they would call it, like take some cups on stage and clear a scene
Hmm.
or something. So I wasn't bothered about that. And of course, I'd played in a band, so walking on a stage didn't mean anything to me. And then I was working with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and we were in India, and we were doing a comedy of errors. And fell in love with Shakespeare at an early age, so I would quote the show all the time. I'd be quoting it because I heard it like 500 times in a year, so it was in my head all the time. So I'd be saying the lines as every actor said the lines while I was backstage. Anyway, I turned with the theatre. We were in, I think, Bombay or New Delhi, and the stage management at the show, and they said, we've got a problem. And I said, oh shit, what's happened to the set? Because I was the master carpenter, so I was in charge
Hmm.
of the set. And they said, one of the actors has got really, really sick, and we don't have anybody to cover that part. And I was like, shit, what are you going to do? I said, maybe get an Indian actor because they love Shakespeare and the English is very good. And they went, no, but we need it now. So we were thinking maybe you could go on. And I went, me? Me? And they went, well, yeah, because you know all the words because you keep saying them. And I was like, yeah, no, but it's fucking,
Yeah.
it's a bit different between saying them and then going on stage. And I thought, well, hang on. I guess I'm in the middle of India. Nobody knows who the fuck I am. If I'm really, really shit, nobody can tell anybody back home. So I said, okay. So the next thing I know, within the next 2 hours, I was standing on stage in costume in 12th Night, in Comedy of Errors, thinking, this is insane. I just did the one night. We carried off the rest of the tour. I finished in San Francisco. I did this Indian Native American pilgrimage and then came back to London. And when I got back, there was a phone call. And it was the artistic director from the Young Vic Theatre in London who had been the director for that play. And he said, hey, it's Tim. And I was like, hello, Tim. Yeah, you know, we're in London. Yes, I know, yeah. He said, thank you so much. You know, you did that thing in India. And I was like, no, it was a pleasure. I had fun doing it. He said, yeah, well, we have a similar problem now. And I have to cover half a week of shows. And I just went into the dressing room and said, does anybody know anybody who knows this play well enough that we could get them in this afternoon? And they all went, what about Tony Dolan? And I was like,
Nice.
shit, no, that was a one-off. I said, no. And he said, listen, please do it. And I said, okay, well, if I do it, then you are obligated to teach me how to act properly Shakespeare. So we agreed, and that's what happened. I went down there, did the shows, and then the following week I did a load of workshops with actors for him and learned, I played all kinds of roles from Macbeth to Orsino and to Richard III. I did scenes and I just fell in love with it. And I said, yeah, I think I'm going to do this, maybe do some more plays and TV. And he looked at me going, that's never going to happen. And I said, you don't think I'm very good? He was like, yeah, but you don't have an agent and you didn't go to drama school. And I'm like, shit, do I have to do all that? And he's like, well, yeah, you do really, normally. So I was like, right. Anyway, an actor friend of mine said, you could talk to my agent if you want. So I went to see his agent. She said, I don't think so. I was like, okay. Then another actor called me up and said, I thought you were looking for an agent. And I said, well, but I think I'm not going to do it really. And he said, well, come and see my agent because he's looking for people. He might like you. So I saw him. And then 2 days later, they both offered me work. And,
Nice.
and so within a month of doing these workshops, being told it's not going to happen, I was on the set of First Night with Richard Gere and Sean Connery.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next month, I was on the set of Judge Dredd with Sylvester Stallone and Alma DeSantis.
Yeah.
And then that was it. I was in a TV show, and then I did a theatre. Then I did some stuff for the BBC. Then I went to Fox to do Sherlock Holmes, where I played Dr. Watson on radio, and we did two seasons. And then, I was working for Queen. I went back to theatre because I like doing the acting, but it takes a lot of time, and then you've got to be auditioning, and I thought I can't be asked with all that stuff. I like doing the end product, but I don't like jumping through all the hoops.
Yeah.
Whereas music is immediate. I'm in control myself. I can record it and just go and play it. So I went back to technical theatre, and I was working for Queen installing "We Will Rock You" in town, and I was going to run the show, be one of the deputies on the show. And my agent called and said, can you get to Park Lane? There's a director wants to meet you. And I said, okay. She says, for a movie. And I was like, yeah, okay. I could do it at lunchtime. I've got an hour. She said, yeah, get it at lunchtime. This is where you're going. So I ran all the way up, covered in crap and dirt with my work boots on, go to this really posh hotel, and they don't want to let me in because they're like, what the fuck? And I said, no, I'm supposed to be here. I've got a meeting. And they're like, okay, right. Are you fixing something? I said, no. I've got a meeting in a hotel room with a director. And they're like, what? Okay, so sit there. So I waited. They called me up. Then there's Peter Weir, who did Truman Show, Gallipoli, all this amazing stuff. And the casting woman. And, hi, I'm Peter. Yeah, we're making this movie. It's about ships and stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah. You know Patrick O'Brien? No, never heard of him. Oh, well, anyway, he wrote these books. And, yeah, so should we do something? And I'm like, yeah, okay. So he sets the camera up. And then he jumps. I'm sitting on the couch. He jumps at me with his pen and stabs the pen just beside my head and starts screaming at me, the ship's going to sink, the water's coming in, what are you going to do? And so I just was like, fucking get back, okay, everybody to that side. And you just started ad-libbing. And then I looked at the time and I thought, fuck, I've got to go back to work. So I said, sorry, I've got to stop. I said, I have to get back to work. I'm working at the Dominion Theatre for Queen. I've got to get back there because I'm only on my lunch break. And they were like, oh, okay, well, thank you very much for coming. I said, yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for seeing me. And ran off. my agent's trying to call me, and I'm like, I'm not answering the phone because I think I just made myself look like a right Fruit Loop there. And I thought, I'm nowhere, nowhere, because I just embarrassed myself and let her down, I thought. So I get back to work. She's trying to call, trying to call. I don't answer. The next day, she calls me in the morning, and I'm on my way to work. So, okay. So I pick it up. Hi, Sarah. She went, hey, how are you? Yesterday, and I said, listen, I'm really, really sorry. I had an hour. I was stressed. I ran up there. I was covered in shit. I met these really nice people. This is a Hollywood movie. They've got a big production. It's Fox Studios. I mean,
Right.
I'm never going to be in that, man. What are you doing? So I said, but anyway, they were really nice. I let you down. I'm really sorry. So I apologized. And she went, are you finished? I went, yeah. She went, he absolutely loved you, and they're flying you out in a month's time, and you're going to be shooting in the in Baja. They're flying you first class to Los Angeles. And I was like, what? And that was it. I was
Nice.
within a month or a month and a half, I was sitting around the table with Paul Bettany and Russell Crowe, the director, just looking at all these British actors going, how the fuck did I get here? So, yeah, but it was mad. But one of the nice things was when I got out of that, they said, oh, Mr. Dolan, I didn't have to get my own bags or nothing. Like
Nice.
nothing. I didn't have to do it. I just, security, they just went, no, you can go straight through, Mr. Dolan. So I just walked straight out of the airport and someone else already had all my stuff. I was like, this is amazing. I want this every time. But I got into this bus to drive down to Mexico because we had to go through TJ, the border of TJ. I drive down there. But when I get in, the three actors that are in there were all actors I worked with at the Royal Shakespeare Company. But I
Nice.
was a technician, not an actor. So I got in and they were like, oh my God, Tony. And I was like, how are you? And they were like, fucking hell, this is great. Wow, what a surprise. And they were going, are you working on this movie? And I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And they were like, oh, this is brilliant. How did you get this work? And I said, I just got it through, the normal channels. And they went, right, so are you in charge of the ship or the set or the design? And I went, no, 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 I'm in it. They went, in what? I went, I'm in the movie. And they were like, fuck off. No, you're not. I said, I am. They were
That's
like,
great.
oh my God. So yeah, it was lovely about it because it was not expected. Again, what I said earlier, Ellie, about, challenging yourself and stuff and just seeing how far you can go. That's what happened. An opportunity came. I thought, well, I don't know if I can or I can't, but I'm being offered it. So why don't I find out? And they'll tell me if I can't. And so that was it. And I remember they looked at rushes after I did one of the scenes, one of the first scenes, and I went to Wendy Stites, who was Peter Weir's wife, who was doing costume. And I went for a cup of coffee and I said, did you look at the rushes from last night? She said, yeah. I said, how were they? She went, they were all right. And I said, all right, okay. And she went, you want to know if you were good? And I said, well, maybe not just that I was good, but I just want to know because Peter never said anything. She went, if the director doesn't say anything and he keeps rolling, you did your job. She said,
Yeah.
don't worry. I watched it. You're really good. So I was like, thank you so much. And I never asked again. I just got on with it. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful time. And it's
Yeah.
bizarre, you turn up on the set and Russell sends you a message and the next thing you know you stop filming and he's flying you to the whiskey to see a band in his helicopter and you land at the airport and he drives you in a Humvee up to the gig and then as soon as the gig's finished you think we're going to party. No, back from the Humvee back in the helicopter and back down to Mexico. It was like, this is so bizarre, you
Yeah.
just it was a wonderful time, wonderful time.
So man, from punk rock black metal beginnings to the big screen, you are an
Yeah.
inspiration. You've lived a million lives. We're impressed here and we're super thankful that you came on the podcast. Is there anything else we can do or people listening to this can do to help Venom Inc. and help you be more
You know,
successful?
I just think that just being fans, not. I think obviously there's a lot of conflict always being around the Venom thing about this and that, and people and members and time and everything else, and so that doesn't never really go away because music attaches us to times in our life. That moment you first heard it, and you want to keep that moment forever.
Yeah.
And sometimes when that changes, you feel like you're being robbed of something, but you're not. The music will maintain, and the person you are when you were then is still with you. I don't want to eradicate anything or erase anything for you. I just want to embrace it and bring it back to you to realize that, okay, maybe tomorrow you have to go to the dentist and you have to make sure you do that banking and you have to go to the store and you have to get your shopping and don't forget to park your car and don't forget you got to pick the keys up and don't forget you got to drop the dog off and all of that stuff. But I want you to go that 16-year-old, that 15-year-old, the 13-year-old, the 12-year-old that you were when you first heard that music. You will be all your life that person. person, and they're inside you. And I want you to experience that every time you see the band. I want you to find that moment and be that moment again, just to see that you're still in there. You're still in there. We age on the outside and we conform to our life, but we're still that vital
Absolutely.
person inside, and I want to tap into that. So come to the shows. You know, we're playing 30 dates. It's only part one. We will get to you if we can, but just come, lose your mind. If it's a thing you're looking at and go, it doesn't look right to me, then close your eyes. Just experience the music. This isn't about judging anything. This isn't about changing your life for the worse. This is about embracing who you are and living it together. So that's all I would say. Just Venom Inc. We're on Facebook and we have a website, you know, .co.uk, and we're on Instagram, and I'm available anytime. If you've got something you want to ask, say, just come and share. You know, I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to share with you. I'm here to be inspired by you, and hopefully we can inspire you back. But we can only do it together. And this is the industry. There is, you know, it doesn't matter how many magazines promote or don't promote. It doesn't matter how many Spotify's do or don't. It doesn't, you know, it all comes down to without you, or me as a fan, but without us, there is no industry. There is no end user. So we are the industry. We're the whole point of it. So if we can cut through the crap and just deal with ourselves, hand in hand, we are music. We are art. We are the expression. So let's be that together. You know, that's my intention anyway. So thank you very
Yeah.
much. For every member of the band, for all the years of support, for everything that's happened, and going forward, just keep that flag flying, keep that light burning. You know, it's forever. It's forever music. It's not just transient. You know.
Yeah. Beautiful
Yeah.
way to end the interview. Thank you so much for your time, Tony. We appreciate it.
You're very, very welcome. And El, I've saved you one of these, which I'll make sure you get, and I've got for your dad too. So if you can see that, yeah. So
Yeah, I'm hoping we can meet you at Mount Dora or in
you
Tampa
can
when you're
count
here.
on it. You can absolutely 100%.
Awesome.
You're going to count
Alrighty.
on it. Yeah. Drinks are on me. Or L can get the drinks. He'll get a bottle of Jack and we'll get some Dr. Pepper. So
Nice,
we'll all be
nice,
good. Yeah,
nice.
absolutely. I
Thanks so
look
much.
forward to it.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you so much, guys. See you very
Thank you.
soon. Be
Thank
good.
you.
Ciao.